All right, I've selected an image here that I took that I can go through sharpening, blurring, and some soft light layer painting techniques to show you how to enhance your image. I make a copy of this, go up here to filter, other. High pass filters are a really popular thing to sharpen skin tones and, fur and hair and that type of thing. So I'll just quickly demo that, what that does. Here's the high pass filter. You can move this radius around wherever you want, go okay. And then you basically switch the blending mode from normal. You could go overlay or soft light or even linear light. My default is usually to go to soft light or overlay for most things. And there you go. I'll call this high pass. And then that sharpens the image slightly and pumps things up if you want. So a quick way to do that. Okay, now I'm gonna make another copy, show you another sharpening technique. So go filter, go to sharpen. There's a bunch of sharpen options here. I like the unsharp mask. That's my favorite. It's been my favorite for years. So you go here, play around with the amount, play around with the radius. I usually pump it up a little bit higher than you might want to. So go, push it a little further than you're comfortable with. And then you can turn the eyeball off. There it is before, there it is after. The reason you push it a little bit further, or I push it a little bit further, is because then I can go in and I can adjust the opacity after. It gives me more kind of options. I'm gonna make another copy here. So this is my unsharp mask layer. So here's my unsharp mask layer. So I want it sharpened here, but I don't want it sharpened back here. I'll make a copy of this. Again, if you don't care about it, whether you're doing destructive or non-destructive editing, the easiest way to deal with this is go to the erase tool. Make sure you pick soft brush or a softer brush. Pick the appropriate opacity, and then you can start basically erasing the areas you don't want sharpened. Now I'm gonna zoom out here. Okay, increase the size of that eraser, and then erase the areas that you don't want sharpened. I'm gonna call this with eraser, and that's again destructive editing. If you are concerned with destructive, non-destructive editing and you want to do non-destructive editing, you use a mask for the same technique. You throw this mask on here, black foreground brush, and then you erase. So now I'm erasing the areas that I don't want the sharpening on. And you can see that it's masking here. If I go too far and I want to remove the mask, you switch your foreground to white, and then that undoes the masking. So I'm going to continue using masking as opposed to the eraser because that's the more professional way of dealing with your photos. So I think I'm going to collapse those two together. It's just going to be easier if I deal with that. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to merge down. So those are merged together. So I've got the area sharpened that I want. The next thing I'm going to go over and I'm going to show you is what if you want to blur parts of the background a bit more, right? A very fast way to do that, let's make a copy. You could go filter, popular blur, and a go-to for many people is the Gaussian blur or the motion blur, but throw the blur on here, blur it to where you feel is appropriate. Throw on a mask, or you could be erasing through. I'm going to say this G blur, the Gaussian blur on it. But I'm going to show you a couple more fancier blurs in the blur gallery. So let's make another copy of this. My favorite blur in the blur gallery is the field blur. This dial here allows you to dial the blur in and out. So now I hardly have any blur. You can also move this pin around. All right. So let's dial this up here. And that's totally blurred. And you see how it's blurring down here? Well, what I can do is I can add a pin here and just go like basically no blur on there. And then I can go and add a pin here and blur that much more. So it gives you pinpoint blurring capabilities. The other thing it does is if you select the blur, it not only blurs, it allows you to create bokeh lighting. So if I increase this, you can see that it's creating this bokeh lighting in this area. Now this pin that I've put hardly any blur on, if I delete it, you can see now the bokeh lighting has spilled down because I removed that pin. Field blur is honestly my favorite new blur in Photoshop just because of the power that it gives you. Okay, so I'm done that. I'm gonna call this field blur, and then throw a mask on this, and then mask any unwanted areas. Okay, here we go. So we've got the field blur and the Gaussian blur, and we can compare those. I think I prefer the field blur because the way that I organize the pins, this can is still in focus more than the Gaussian blur. But you can see both techniques are fairly similar. Delete the Gaussian blur layer, stick with my field blur. I think that's good for now. So if I'm happy with those results, just merge the layer together. So let's make another copy of this. Maybe levels adjustments quickly. So I think I'm happy with this, some subtle adjustments. Shift select those, right click, merge layers. Part of the reason I picked this image is because it has some yellow and blue and some different colors in here. So I'm going to go through some layer painting your photo techniques. I'm a big fan of throwing it on soft light. I've selected a yellow color here that's similar to the tape on here. And let's start pumping the yellow color up a little bit. So you see what the soft light allows me to do is it allows me to paint and kind of pump colors up that I can't really get when I'm just doing it with the hue saturation. So if you want the color punched up more, you can just go with overlay as opposed to soft light. There's soft light, and there it is at overlay. You might want to just crank the opacity down ever so slightly, and there's your overlay layer. And then correspondingly, you could do it with some of the blue. All right, so I have the blue painted where I wanted to, and then you can see soft light versus overlay. And then I'm going to try an orange layer here. As if I wanted to pump up this stuff over here, throw again an overlay or soft light. You could actually go up here to the high pass if you wanted to combine things and kind of like lower the opacity a little bit. Okay, I just went away for a minute and organized some things. I made a little group to put everything in of what I did, just to sort of show you the before and after. The way that you make groups again is as you go down here, you click on that, and then you can drag things into the group. Let's take a zoom in a little bit tighter. So before and after. One thing that I did while I put things on pause, while we were combining the high pass filter, I lowered the opacity to 55 and then put a mask on the high pass filter layer just to erase some certain areas. So if I right click on this, I can disable, and you can see what it was before and then enabled it. And then I also made a soft light layer and painted in white. I do want to demo really quickly that because I really am a fan of using soft light and overlays as painting techniques over top of your photos. So just watch the magic here. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to make a new layer here. Put this on soft light. I was feeling things were a bit dark in here with my photo edit, and I wanted to kind of bring out some of the metal up here, the metal beams a bit more. So soft light, go to your brush, and then watch this as I just brush over these things. Brings it back like magic, all that detail out in the shadow, right? So it's also a way to extract detail out of shadows. If you use a soft, light, white painted layer over some shadows, it can really pull out some details. So that's a little bit of a tip for you. There you go, there you have it. Everything from the high pass, painting with soft light and overlay layers, your Gaussian blur or your field blur, and unsharpened mask to really enhance your image. These are all techniques that kind of extend your creativity and artistic vision in terms of what you can do with your photographs. You can actually start designing and almost painting them in some sort of way